Right.
There can be instances where one cares more for the other. How would you go about that? Especially when, let's say, like you tell them how you feel, and they tell you what you want to hear, but it doesn't actually.
Can you do this again? Yeah, please.
So when you're in a relationship and you care more about.
Can you? My mind works a little differently. Just use you and I as an example.
Okay, let's say you and I are in a relationship,
Okay.
and I care more for you, and I only perceive that from the actions and how like we communicate with each other. And I express that to you, and you say that you care about me, but I still feel the same way that I'm giving what I've heard.
And
How do you go about maybe fixing that, or would you just abandon the other person?
if you have the flu like I do, and even though I don't care for you as much as you care for me, am I still making you soup? Am I changing your diapers? Am I bathing you? It's true that it's an unequal relationship, as all relationships are. The romantic kinds, I don't really much care for. They're completely useless, especially these days. But since we're all emotional junkies, that aside, am I keeping the basic things of our relationships, our relationship, active and engaged? If that's the case, it's fine. You're never going to change me, and I'm not going to change you. In all relationships, there is an inequality of power, and that's just the way things are. Unless, of course, you and I go to a gathering, and because there's a part of you that suffers from emotional poverty that you don't get from me, Anna over there keeps winking at you, and that arouses jealousy in me. And since all relationships is about possessiveness, I kind of come over and push Anna away and put my arms around you and kiss you, and we go to the back seat of a truck. And for that particular moment in time, our relationship is balanced. And once I no longer feel the poverty, I go back to being who I've always been, a little aloof, whereas you're mostly engaged. You know, 50 years ago, things are much different than they are now, especially for women and for men, I suppose. I think today, if you want to go into any relationship, you should go into it with a good amount of power. Be a bit more self-sufficient, And for example, my mom's time, you can't divorce. So even if you marry a crummy husband, he's there for life. Just in case you want to walk out, society is going to kind of pounce on you. Your parents are, God is, religion is, every aspect of society. And you're probably just going to kind of become an outcast. Today, the story is very, very different, that you in fact do have a way out. But when you do walk out, where exactly do you go? What do you have? What belongs to you? So the more self-sufficient you are, the more damage you're going to experience. The less sufficient you are, then you become more dependent, and just in case things don't pan out, you're just ruined. There is nothing wrong with falling in love, and so. You should do what Ashley does. You don't get into relationships because you love. That's stupid. Imagine you like Anna and you like me as well. Well, what can Anna offer you? Youth? 10 minutes of pleasure? And then what? She's a puzzle. She's, still trying to figure out what the meaning of life is. You're the same way. There's a good amount of poverty there, and there's a good amount of poverty there. So what you have is two very insufficient people getting together. It may be true that I'm 3 times your age, but I offer you stability. I don't go through very many mood swings. And given what human nature demands, which is one of stability, that's what we've been doing for the past few millions of years. Try to create stability. Where you can build your house and make sure it doesn't crumble often. Today, it's a different story. Everything falls apart. It is true that you and I may only have, a relatively healthy time for maybe the next 5-6 years as my body begins to betray me, and then the relationship betrays you. But those 5 years will kind of give you things that Anna can't give you. And what will happen when I pass is that you will try to find qualities that you experienced with me in other people. But 18-year-olds don't have it, 20s don't have it, 30s don't have it, 40s don't have it, not even 50s have it. And so in some ways it is to your gain to hang out with me, in some ways it is to your disadvantage to hang out with me. Because once I die, you're going to go back into life only to realize that, life doesn't have very many things to offer you. You should look at relationships as a business, and it's bankrupt. So just go in there, have a good time for as long as you can, and then when it's done, it's done. Are you going to be hurt? Yeah. Were you expecting to be hurt? Yeah. It's not going to be prosperous. And don't create ridiculous fantasies and illusions for yourself, because then you'll seriously get hurt. I don't come to class in hopes of teaching anyone anything. You just come, have a good time, and then go home. In my life, I had a couple of chances to get married at a very, very young age. I looked at these women who wanted to be part of my life, and I said, well, the first one is very possessive. She gets jealous, even if it was to look at a dog. I said, do I really want to spend my life, in damage control? Screw that. So I left her. I liked her, loved her, but it just wasn't worth my time. The second one would just become very angry very quickly. I had a certain image of how my life wanted to be turned out. I wanted to have gatherings at my house. I wanted to talk, spend a good amount of time with people, talk about things that I found to be valuable, but she didn't. So despite all, the emotions I had for her, it wasn't very difficult for me to leave. I think if you know what you want, what you do is you test people. Okay? If, for example, you're done with drinking and smoking and you wanted to get into a relatively healthy relationship, you say to me, so Amir, what are you doing tonight? And you wait for the answer. If I'm going to tell you I'm going to go home and call my friends and go to a party, that's the first sign that I don't value you enough to make sacrifices. And that's a good GPS to have. But keep testing and testing and testing. And once you come to a relatively healthy conclusion that regardless of what you're offering me, I keep declining, or I keep maybe disappointing, then there comes a point where you just walk away. I think the difficulty is because most of the relationships happen to us accidentally, you just run into things and the like grows into love, then you get stuck. Then you want to fix something that it's just not the right time for it to be fixed. If you're still going through some anger issues with your dad, your mom, your this, your that, I don't want to waste my time. I like you, but it's not worth my time. Once you're done with that, then maybe you and I can sit and have a cup of coffee. The problem isn't your companion. The problem is the sort of confusion that you yourself had that you took into the relationship. And then out of that, you created all these ridiculous fantasies. And you wanted those fantasies to come true, when in fact they can't. It's no different than Karl Marx talking about, say, this thing, what did he call it? Species self, where your life is an extension of your passion. He wouldn't use this kind of language, but your life would be an extension of your soul, so to speak, right? But what Karl Marx failed to realize is that human nature is a very, very strong force, and it's at play all the time. He assumed that it's the factories, people like Elon Musk or Trump or Obama or capitalism, that these forces are the evil that contaminate human life. But in fact, it's just the evil lives in us. Our ignorance about many things, our laziness, our complacency, all sorts of issues, And so he creates this magnificent temple of utopia, but it can never be realized. So you shouldn't make the same mistake as Marx did or Jesus did. You should be very sober, very grounded. You should look at relationships as buying a car. Most people only have $2,000 in their bank account, and that's the car they can afford. So what kind of a car can you get for $2,000? Well, the transmission is bad, the brakes are bad, tires are bad, nothing works. But, it can get you from point A to point B for like a month or two, then it breaks down. Some people have 5,000, which means that the car, instead of breaking down every week, it breaks down every 2 months. Okay? Some people can afford a brand new car, which stays good for about 10 years, hopefully, So I think if you don't really know what it is that you want and things happen to you accidentally, you risk the chance of being stranded in the middle of the highway every 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And you can kind of replace money by, say, your emotional maturity, your intellectual maturity, how well you've observed your own life experiences, learned from them. The more you have learned, the richer you are, which means that you can afford buying people who have a good amount of maturity to them. I'm not talking about someone like me who can come to class and just yap on for the next 5 hours. That's stupid. Talking means nothing. You can have a very rich emotional life. You can have a very rich intellectual life. Vincent van Gogh had a really, really rich emotional life. Intellectually, he was kind of a mess. His physical life was a complete mess, So just because someone is an emotional junkie or someone is an intellectual junkie, it doesn't mean that they're grounded. They know what to do with life, Unless you just want to live in a cave or be a hippie, that's a different story. But if you want your relationships to work, and if you value your time, your youth, your energy, i.e. the riches that you have, and no one can do that when they're young. It's impossible. If you listen to what Ashley said, even when you think about the things you did yesterday, you kind of laugh and say, was I really that stupid? And the answer is, well, yes, you were. But give it a shot, but see where it goes.
Well, that advice seems like it's working within the world, the way the world works at the current moment. What if I don't agree with how the world works at the current moment? I feel a very strong desire to try something new, sort of change the standard.
So let me, before I forget, give you an example or an analogy, and then I'll ask you to rephrase your question. So you have an 18-year-old man who happens to have been raised in a Catholic environment, a religious environment, and they have a very inspiring experience. Okay, they have a vision or they have a dream, and they say, you know what, I'm going to devote my life to philosophy or to God. And so they become a monk, or they become a, let's just say they become a monk. Women are much better in living a solitary life than men are, or men can. So this man has an inspired moment, and he goes into a monastery at the age of, say, and fasts and prays and does all those crazy things that monks usually do, unfortunately. And so at the age of 25, 30, on their way to Pete's Coffee, they run into a young woman, let's just call her Ashley. And Ashley, just by chance, happens to be showing a lot of skin. And this young man, I'm not talking about you, Ashley, this young man looks at Ashley and her skin, and all of a sudden, no longer chanting the Jesus prayer, you know, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on my soul, a sinner. He just says, oh, Ashley, oh, Ashley, oh, Ashley. And forgets all the past 10 years of being so fully devoted to God, and begins to pursue Ashley. Okay. And then comes to, for the first time, realize the power of women, the power of sex, that women and sex have powers that God and religion will never have. And though he'll still go back to the monastery, he'll masturbate, once or twice or thrice a day. He'll play with boys a little bit, girls with a little bit. So he does all sorts of things sexually. Now, this is a man who wanted to devote himself to religion, but failed to understand some very basic things about human nature. Sex is part of life. There is a part of you that belongs to the world. Caesar, you have a flesh. It needs food, it needs shelter, it needs clothing. You sometimes depend so much on the judgments of other people, and make sure those are the people who are going to pass judgments upon you. They're relatively mature, because they have the power to either give you value or take value away. That's just the way life works. And then there is this other part of life where you're creative, you're spiritual. You don't need other people in your life. You can exercise autonomy. So I think there are certain forces in life that you need to look at and embrace and accept, because they have a tremendous amount of power over you. And there are certain parts of you that the world can't touch, and that's fine. Now, is it true that all young people desire to revolt against the social status? Absolutely. There is nothing interesting about society. I mean, society is like a cage, and all young people feel as if they're being constricted, demolished. I mean, look at this class. Look at me. I assume, coming to class, that I have something to offer. You're just young. You want inspiration. You want excitement. You want your class to be alive. You want to grow wings and fly. And so you raise your hand and you say, can you change your teaching style? I said, no, I'm an old dog. I can't change anything about me. This is what you get. And that's the world. And you say, no, I want out of this. Well, drop, leave. Do something else. But where exactly can you go when you don't feel constricted? So that has always been the passion of young people, to create change, to remove homelessness, to create justice, fairness. Then you get to be like Lindsey Graham or Jim Jordan, all the politicians, where you're fearful of not being re-elected, so you kind of sleep with the devil, so to speak. I think Morpheus was right, giving some mature advice to Thomas Anderson. There are some laws you can break. There are some laws you can bend. You just have to be wise enough to know which laws you can get away with. And you must also be profoundly mature and aware that which laws will impact you, just in case you don't obey. I may like you, but if you don't do the assignments, I will fail you. Now, you can play with the assignments. You can talk about your life, you can talk about your past, your present, your future, within the context of, say, the audios. That is an A. But just in case you say, you suck, none of the audios I can relate to, I refuse to write any essays, that's great, that's great. You're an American, you're exercising your individual rights, but so will I. Your grade will be an F, you know. And if you can live with that, that's fine. You know, some of the homeless people you see out there, sure, some of them have very tragic stories, but some of them, they just didn't listen to the advice of those around them who had some life experiences. And they just said, you know what, I think I know better. And so I think I know better led them to this particular stage in their life, you know. The other thing is, what exactly is it you're revolting against? And if you want to make some changes, what do those changes look like? You know, go ahead.
Just speaking about like relationships, love and all of that. I think that
Like just a romantic, regular, cheesy kind?
well, I think that kind is very powerful, and all kinds are powerful. All kinds of love are powerful, and I do think there is some validity in like picking a partner that feel like you have a good sense that it's going to work, and that you like logistically work together in a productive way. But I think that like frame of like that mindset is trying to fit into the capitalistic framework that I fundamentally want to reject. I don't, I just feel like it's kind of small to try to fit my life into some system that I don't agree with. When I know if I have a good relationship by those means and I like have children, I don't want my children to have to live by those means. And what if I spend my life doing nothing about something I feel strongly against?
You can save some money and move to Georgetown, which is in Nevada City. You can buy like a tiny little shed, a cabin for about maybe $400,000, 5-acre property in the middle of the forest. There are no Safeways. There are no Pete's Coffee. Everything is like a, tiny little store. No Costco's. Population, the last I visited Georgetown was only 600 people. Beautiful, one high school, one junior high, one mechanic shop, one Chinese restaurant. No Taco Bell, no McDonald's. You can move there and send your kids to Waldorf school and have them be trained by the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner. There's nothing wrong with that. Your kids will eventually come in contact with cell phones and YouTube technology. They will desire things that you may not enjoy, but you have no power over your kids. You could leave the US and go to certain parts of India, certain parts of Africa, certain parts of the Middle East, like Dubai. And with 450,000, you could buy a mansion there. And it's Islamic tradition. Your girls will probably wear the hijab or the head covering. They will go to school, learn Arabic, Persian, Arabic, English, and possibly French. They'll be very modest, very conservative in many ways. The government will in fact pay you. Every month they will not only have a bucket of dates outside of your door, but they also, because of the oil that they sell to foreigners, you will also get some of that money, But that means you kind of completely overhauling your life and being okay with living in a Middle Eastern environment, which is going to go against everything you believe. That you can't walk around this way. That men will have power. That women, for the most part, will have no voice. And if they do, for the most part, they have to remain invisible. That's just the way life is. There is also this other aspect, which I think it's important to you're not going to leave the US. Right now, you're single, unmarried. Would you categorize as compatibility? It's a fantasy that currently just lives in your head. Just wait until you share the same roof with someone. And then all the junk that lives in you and all the junk that lives in me will come out. So right now, most of the stories that we have in our heads are untested. That's the thing you need to understand. And while things are being untested, it's kind of like me playing tennis with the tennis ball in Davis. The ball just returns the ball to you the way you send it to the ball. There is no challenge there. And you assume that just because you're able to rally with the tennis ball for like 5 hours, you're really great. And I assume to be like Bjorn Borg, in the 1980s. And then some guy who's playing with the wall next to me says, why don't we go to the campus and play on the courts? I say, yeah, let's do it. And when you realize the balls are going all over the place and not coming straight to you, you realize how much you really, really suck as a tennis player. So that's the first thing, that in our own heads, as long as we remain unchallenged, and there is this beautiful verse in the Quran where there's a prayer that is told by God to human beings, that if you ever want to stand to pray, ask God to never test you. Because if you're tested, you will fail. I know right now we just pay lip service to, like, Jesus went to the desert and he was tempted by the Satan and Jesus said, get away from me. I'm not going to say that. It's really easy to demonize Elon Musk or Donald Trump because, look at me. I have no power in life. But just in case I was to be given like billions of dollars, you think what? I'm going to go around helping the homeless people? I'm going to be drunk with the power. And I'm not quite sure when the time will be for me to throw up from that intoxication. And upon sobering up, if I'm going to have another relapse, get more drunk with power, bully more people. I'm not tested. All I have is this classroom and tiny little power I have with my degrees, my tenure, and the 30 years of experience. And despite my tiny, tiny little life, do you see the way I express myself sometimes? I am a bully. And this is without money, without fame. Okay. So the real test comes when you actually live with someone for a long time. Men are aloof. Look at the Old Testament and the Quran. Most of the prophets, they're not women, they're men. There is something wrong with men. Men are just miserable, unhappy creatures. Which means what? That men are going to be selfish in a completely different way than women are. Okay? This is not true of every man, but most men. You also haven't had the benefit of being in a long-term relationship to see what long-term relationships do to your passions. That there will be many, many moments where you look at your man and you say, I just want to go out for a walk by myself. You know, so that you haven't experienced yet. Or maybe you have, I don't know. So that's the second aspect, that there comes a point where you realize that when you have a long-term relationship, the passion, the love, the mystery that exists in the relationship, they're no longer there. Third, men are not ready for a family. Most men, at least. So it's an imposition that you have to force a man to say, you know what, it's time for having kids. And he's going to do it with a good amount of resentment, but he'll do it nevertheless. And you have no idea what happens when you get pregnant. See, while you're in a monogamous relationship, that's just you and your man or you and your woman, all of your passion are going to be localized in one single human being. Okay? This is the only cup on the table, which means this is the only cup I'm going to be interested in. If on the other hand, I had 10 cups, no doubt I would approach this cup very, very differently and use it once in a while. And if this cup had any conscience to it, it would feel resentment and jealousy and anger. Once you become pregnant, you realize you're going to care for your husband less. You have no idea how that's going to impact your husband. If he's going to like it more or like it less. And just in case you and your companion, you depended on your companion, and your companion felt as if he is your Messiah, this absence of attention that he no longer gets from you is going to make him feel very, very, very isolated, very resentful, very angry, and is going to hold you in contempt. You did this to him. You haven't experienced that yet. Okay. Then you will have children. Then you realize all this idea about, capitalism is bad, and I don't want a mansion, I want to live a modest life. Then you realize you're going to love your kids more than life itself. And then you will understand something profoundly important. I don't want them to go to public school. گلی که خم بدادم پیچ و تابش ز آب دیدگونم دادم آبش به درگاه الهی کی روابی گل از ما دیگری گیره گلابش. You know how you raise your kids? With the tears of your eyes and the blood of your heart. That's your life. To raise your kids, you give them your life. You give them your time. You give them language. You discipline them. You train them how to think, how to feel. You sacrifice yourself. You become a sacrificial lamb. It's not Jesus Christ, it's you. Okay. And then you know what happens. به درگاه الهی کی روابی. Is it fair, after all the tears and all the blood I put into my kids, I send them to school, and they come home and say, yo, Dad, what did you do with it? What the sort of language is that? Say, really? I did all of this stuff so that I can hear bad language? You say, you know what? Public school is not worth it. Drugs are not worth it. Alcohol is not worth it. Porn is not worth it. Hanging out with ridiculous friends is not worth it. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send them to private school. But private school is 30, 40, 50,000 a year. I'm not talking about college. I'm talking about first grade. Who the hell spends 40, 50,000 on a first grade? Worried parents. The moment you become a parent, you have a sibling. It's called paranoia. And just in case your husband comes home and says, well, let me tell you what Karl Marx said about capitalism. You know what you're going to do? I don't give a shit what Karl Marx said. I don't give a shit what you say. I don't want my kids in harm's way. Go out there, get yourself a job. And God forbid if your kids come out with some health issues. You're going to pounce on your husband. What happened to the love? Goes away. Life is a serious business. You know, I mean, the 60s are over. I've had many students who are the product of the 1960s. All these ridiculous religionists and hippies. Useless. You know, they get themselves back to school at the age of like 50, 60. We have nothing left in them. And you ask them, what do you want to do? I want to get my PhD in neuroscience. You're almost dead. You should have done this at the age of 18, not 60. Can I tell you guys a story? You really don't have much of a choice. So let me just give it to you. Before I tell you a story, do you have any questions? It's okay.
How do you expect it versus how
What?
That's a good question.
Is it? Huh, I think she likes you. There is a martial artist. I don't know if the story is accurate or true, but it's been floating around for years. His name is Van Damme. When he was young, he was very, very, very cute. I would have slept with him. But as he's aged really, really badly. He's very unattractive and, in fact, hideous, much more than Socrates. His first marriage didn't work out too well. So he went on to a second marriage, and then third, and then fourth, and then fifth, and then sixth. And then his seventh wife was, in fact, his first wife. I don't think you ever leave religion. I think what happens is you're born into one, then you begin to question things. And you realize that your questions have so much depth and so much angst that the sort of religion that's been given to you can't nourish you, so you leave it. You become a Buddhist, let's just say, or you become an atheist. Time passes, certain events happen, you gain some maturity, some experience, some insights. And then by chance, as you're driving home, there's a bumper sticker. And you read it, and it says like John 3:95. You say, that's interesting. You go home and you have this Bible you haven't really opened for 50 years. You open it up and say, that's really, really interesting. And then as you're walking on MacArthur, you pass by this beautiful church. You say, maybe I should go in. But they say, no, I've been there, I've done that, but you're tempted. And then you go in. And then you look at the artwork that has taken centuries, you know. And the guy comes and gives a sermon, and it happens to be just the right person for you, just at the right time. And you say, you know what? It's not a bad thing. And then you go revisit the book again, you realize, wow, this is really, really, really a good book. Karl Marx was part of the young Hegelians, a dreamer of sorts. And so after a while, he came to realize it's no good, so he walked away from it. But if you look at his philosophy very, very closely, you realize that it's to some extent a carbon copy of Hegel. It's just in a different way. But it has the same trinity. It has the same concept of that eventually humanity is going to go towards a place that will bring about justice and fairness and equality. Okay? I think when you're young, a software slowly is going to be given to you by your parents and by society, by culture. What you will do later on with that software, as you begin to revolt against it in adolescence, is that you will go back to it, but you will revise it and you will refine it. It becomes something that you never imagined it to be when you were young. I didn't like my father. when I met my own teacher. I thought his ideas were ridiculous. But then 30, 40 years had to pass. Then I was forced to look at his life, but just became interested. Then I realized that this is really a good man. And I didn't want to be like my teacher, Hussein, but I really did want to become was like my father. You know, someone who didn't make very much money and yet was able to kind of keep a family afloat for about 60, 70 years, came here at the age of 50, divorced his culture, divorced his parents, everybody, and washed cars. I mean, this is a man with a good amount of self-respect and dignity. Comes here, washes cars without speaking a word of English. And at the car wash, when someone told him to fuck off, he would just say thank you because he didn't understand what that meant. You know, and he's 93, 92, and he's relatively a healthy, old man. So the sort of things that you rebel against, none of us in this class enjoy our parents, but just wait. You will become like them in so many ways. And it surprises you, even if the things about them you didn't like. You realize that there are, you're seasoned by who and what they've always been. So let me tell you a story now. Anna? Yeah.
Are women and men more different than similar in their disposition?
This is going to sound a little weird, but men ought to force women to think, and women ought to force men to feel. So, women have a tremendous amount of power. Elon Musk has a tremendous amount of power. But if he doesn't have a very mature intellect, then that power is going to go to waste. If on the other hand, he knows how to think well, look at society, poverty, homelessness, all sorts of ills that live in society, then he can use his power well. Women have it's always been true, from ancient times to the present. I mean, consider for a moment why we have prostitution. It was to pay honor to the goddesses. There is something about women can inspire men. But as time passes, it just turns into a business, We can do this like maybe next week when we come back, or the following week, about the difference between men and women. But since many of you in this class are stuck on romantic relationships, let me just say a couple of things and then move on. A few years ago, my first wife and I went to a gathering in Los Angeles. It was my first wife or second wife? It was my third. At any rate, so it was a Persian wedding, so people dance and all that. So when I get back to Roseville, there is a message on my answering machine. It's this woman says, "If you're so-and-so, can you please give me a call?" Sure. So I called her and she says, "Are you Mr. Sabzavari?" I said, "Yes." "Was that your son dancing on the stage?" I said, "Yes, he was. That's my son." "Well, how old is he?" "He's 19. "Is he ready for marriage?" "So why do you ask?" "I have a daughter. She'll soon be 18. Iran just had a different culture. America, it's just very difficult to raise kids. Life is just difficult. And if I'm not careful, my daughter will no doubt be contaminated. If, your son is ready, and I like the way you guys behave and how he was, maybe they can kind of get together, have a chat, and if they're compatible, maybe they can, go at it. I said, okay, why don't I come and visit you guys? So are you coming with the family? No, it's just me. So I get on my donkey and ride to Los Angeles, and I stay in their home for about 3-4 days. And I examine how the family is, how they eat, if they have any conversations, if the father just picks up the plate and goes and sits by the TV, if they do have conversations, the nature of the conversation, if everybody helps cleaning the table, and then I asked them if they could invite other friends, if they have any alcohol, if they smoke, if they watch porn. And then the day before I was to leave, I asked this young woman if she'd be okay with me going to her college classes and just hanging out with her. At first she resisted, but kind of grabbed her by the throat. She said, yes, of course. And so I came back to Roseville, and I looked at my wife and I said, relatively decent family. I think we should both go and visit them. So we both go and we give this another, try, and we both enjoy the family. And what we come to realize is that kids, for the most part, turn out to be like their parents. So if their parents happen to have some issues, no doubt those issues are going to be given to the kids, consciously or unconsciously. So my wife likes them as well. And they say, well, it's maybe time for these two young people to meet. I said, no, it's time for you guys to come to our place now. Stay with us for a week or so and see how we are, And so they come here and they realize, well, we play music all the time and we have religious and philosophical conversations. And my son is very involved. And they say, yeah, it's fine. And so on the fourth meeting, we have these two young people meet. They don't leave the house. We just give them like the living room while the older folks sit on the deck and talk about nonsense for about 2-3 hours. And so they leave. And I call my son into the study after a few weeks, a few days, and I say, so, what do you think about marriage? Oh, I'm still young. I said, we're all young for marriage. You think you're ready? No, Dad. I said, nobody's really ready for marriage. What do you think about that girl who was here? Well, I need to get to know her. I realize that despite all the things that my son has read and all the conversations we've had over the years, he's still very stupid. I said, get to know what exactly? Well, I need to get to know her. No, you can never get to know anyone. The best you can do is make sure that, that she cooks well and she goes to school, and once in a while you guys have conversations and you take out the trash and you wash the dishes. That's all you need to know, And we go back and forth only to realize that he has a girlfriend. And I didn't know about that. That's like blasphemy, So I say, oh, so you have a girlfriend. What's your name? So I'm like waiting to hear a Persian name, Jale or Ariana or, Susan or something. It's like, Jennifer. Jennifer? Who the hell is Jennifer? Does she have a middle name? Yes, Jennifer. Jennifer? Yeah, what's her last name? Jennifer. If you've seen that movie, Wedding Singer, her name is Julia, but the guy's last name is Gulia. So I says, oh, you're going to be Julia Gulia, right? That's pathetic. So, and I'm thinking, well, if they, my son and this Jennifer dude, if they were to get married, when they go to a gathering, he's going to say, well, this is Jennifer, and people are just going to laugh at him. So I said, well, okay, well, why don't you invite her? Let me just check her out. Let me see who she is, what she is, where she came from. So this Jennifer comes to the house, and she's like wearing this tiny little rope of a skirt. You guys know what a rope is? Like it's a rope. It's not even a skirt. It's like a rope. So when I look at her, I say, oh, so that's her definition of beauty, like this. And this is her first time meeting us. That's really wonderful. A great amount of self-respect there, right? And so we sit and have a conversation. So and she has like a tattoo, like one of those over there, one on her forehead. I say, oh, Christ, nothing wrong with that, by the way. And so we sit and have conversations, and she tells me, I ask her, so how's your mom? Oh, she's okay. Where is she? She's in Nebraska. Well, that's great. So your parents do what? Well, I haven't talked to my dad for like years. I said, oh, fuck. All right, that's great too. So are you going to school? Oh, no, school is for losers. I said, oh, do you know I went to school for 20 years? That by default makes me a loser? Probably, yeah. I mean, I'm just learning from life. Not like school like this, I said, oh, another hippie. Okay. So do you have a job? No. Okay, so do you like my son? Yeah. Do you know he's from Iran? What state is that? So first of all, it's a country and it's in the Middle East. Oh, well, do they speak English? No, goddammit, it's Persian. Well, do you know much about Persia? No, I'm really not interested. So I look at my son and I say to myself, what a stupid kid. A product of 18 years of suffering and sacrifice by myself and my wife. This piece of shit is the outcome. So I look at my son and I say, take her home and come back without her ASAP. You gotta dump her. But Dad, I love her. Another stupid response. So no, you don't love her. You can only love something if you understand it. And you have no idea what the hell you're doing. You're just infatuated. It's an accident. You love the sex, you love her body, you love her face, but that's the limits of it. She doesn't make for a good life partner. And he resists. Then I take away his cell phone, I take away his laptop, I go to Home Depot and buy a couple of deadbolts, drill the door of his bedroom and lock it up. I put some fence behind the window, and like Galileo, he's under house arrest. And I wait until this addiction kind of slowly fades. And as he has gone through a good amount of rehab, I call him out and I say, are you ready? Ready for what, Dad? Marriage. You're now 20, 21 almost. It's time. He looks at me and says, why are you so arrogant? Me? I am the humblest of people you will ever encounter. No, Dad, you're an ass. No, I'm really a nice guy. Why do you impose your will on me? I'm not doing that. Yes, you are. Okay, I am. What do you want to do? Why do you want me to marry her? I say, listen, how long have your mom and I been married? 30 years. Do you think what? Marriage is easy? For those of you in this class who have some age on you, like you're 25, 26, 98, if an 18-year-old just graduated from high school, came to you and said she wants to drop out or he wants to drop out, what are you going to say to them? That, yeah, it's a great idea? If you have any common sense, if you have learned anything from your own experiences, you will do whatever you possibly can to knock some sense into the thick skull of this young person. Stay in school. Before you know it, blink of an eye, you'll be 60. Stay in school, get it done with. Okay? That's what experience does. It doesn't allow you to be in the gray area. You're just black and white. You've lost time, you've lost youth, you've lost money, you've lost energy, you've lost many parts of your own heart To realize, well, stay in school, graduate, get some power, then go out there. If you want to fool around with life, go fool around with life. But you have power. So I tell him the importance of stability, money, school, being with someone who comes from a relatively decent background, is not too contaminated, hasn't gone through many ups and downs. And it doesn't mean that just because you have a relatively dark and gloomy background that there is something wrong with you or life is going to be bad for you forever. No, we're just talking about possibilities and potentials, that's all. And eventually I convinced this young man to marry. He says, okay, I'll marry, but I have no money. I tell him, you need money for what exactly? Well, we're going to have an apartment. I need rent money. No, you're going to live with us. What? You live with us? What do you mean live with you guys? You live with us. For how long? About 2 years. Because all of us need a GPS to life. If you want to have a relatively good relationship, make sure that you live in a community of people that you can look up to, that they have relationships, that it's solid. You know what they do with disagreements. If they scream, if they shout, if they do drugs, if they physically abuse each other, or they sit and have a conversation, or maybe they just go for a walk and then come back and have conversations. What is their approach to money? Okay. So I say to him, you guys should live with us for about, 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. Just see how things work. Copy us. And once you've copied things well, the things you don't like, well, get rid of. Revise them. Fashion them in a way that works for your relationship. So after 7 months into their marriage, I say, so son, when are you guys going to have kids? So Dad, I'm still learning about myself and learning about her. So, well, that's stupid. The more you learn, the more saturated you become, the less interested you'll be. And the only reason you guys are interested in your romantic partner is because there is still mystery. That mystery could be fiction or it could be fact. And most often in our relationships, we create stories. That's what love does. You give things to people that they don't really deserve. Someone has read a lot of books, therefore they are intelligent. Or because I love them. No, they're still a dumbass. But because you love them, you assume that they're intelligent. He is so pretty. No, he's not. It's only because you love them that makes them pretty. They're so generous. They are not. Just wait. Okay? And I look at my son and say, listen, a couple of things can happen. You can spend a good amount of time with your companion until they bore you, and you will look for a way out. Or you can create a buffer. And for those of you who may not know what a buffer is, like a bumper sticker to your car, just in case you get hit, you won't fully experience the impact. The bumper absorbs most of the punishment. Kids are like that. We don't go home looking at your companion saying, so honey, how are you? That's not what you ask. You say, so how are the kids? And so for the next 18 long years, the only conversation you have are about your children. When the kids leave, you as a father are like 50. You as a mother are about 40. Even if you wanted to leave the relationship, the history is like super glue. At least it used to be, not anymore. So I took his hand, I went to the kitchen, grabbed his wife's hand, and pulled them to the bedroom. Pushed them in, locked the door from the outside. I told them before leaving, I'm going to be standing outside of this door. And I want to hear noises, the ahs and the oohs. And I love you. And then when you come out, I want to know that she's pregnant. And lo and behold, she was. And after a year, I look at my son and say, so when is the second one coming? Oh, no, not a second one. I think it's going to be it. This is it. No, 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 no. Don't be stupid. You will die. Your wife will die. Your son needs a life companion, a sibling, a brother or a sister. Get to work. And so after a couple of children, I said, it's time for you guys to move out. Knowing how expensive life is, it's something that Middle Easterners do. We bought them a house next door to ours. They visit us every day. As we visit our parents, I mean, I do it once a week. My brothers and sisters do it 2-3 times a week. There is nothing wrong with not having parents. There is nothing wrong with having a broken background. And there is nothing wrong with experimenting with life, as long as you don't get crushed by those experiences, and as long as you don't become like paralyzed by those experiences. I was working and building something, and a tool slipped and hit me in the eye. But my body has the intelligence to heal itself, so I'm not too worried. But I could have easily lost an eye. That's not repairable. It's okay to be injured as long as you can recover. If on the other hand you're injured, and that injury becomes the background of all of your decision-making abilities, then you run into difficulties. You don't need to think too much about relationships as long as you just understand the first noble truth in Buddhism. All experiences, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's with religion or drinking a cup of tea or being in a romantic love relationship. There is a moment of birth, and all births are exciting and inspiring. Then there is a different stage where you live out the pleasure. Then there comes a time where you realize it's no longer satisfying you. It doesn't mean that you need to leave the marriage, but it does suggest that before you started this relationship, you knew it's going to be exciting. You also knew that there's going to come a time where you have to face the reality, which is this relationship has nothing else to offer you, except once in a while you have good sex. Once in a while you have good conversations. Once in a while you sit, have dinner, and have great time together. Once in a while you go out on a cruise. But you also know that there are lots of areas in your relationship that are dead and are hemorrhaging. As long as you know that, you'll be fine. But this idea that it's going to be forever happy and joyous, just, right, Ashley? Now tell them. They think I'm just making this crap up.
You're doing a great job.
Oh, you're very kind.
Kind of like,
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that most people, the majority of people, acclimatize to their disabilities?
Climatize?
Acclimatize.
What is it? Oh. Well, habits are very difficult to get rid of. You know. Look, one of the things that I learned in my pathetic little life is from my own teacher, is that he only focused on my habits. He only forced me to overcome them. Because You know, lobsters are very, very interesting animals. Let me just say this and then we'll go home. So the lobster has like a jello kind body and a concrete of a shell. The problem with the life of a lobster is that the jello part keeps growing, but the shell remains the same. And if the lobster doesn't do anything, it'll just die. So what the lobster will do is it'll hide behind some rock somewhere and will force the shell to break open. And then it breaks open. And there is lots of pain and suffering there. You know, a lobster can say, you know what, I'm content with being like 2 feet tall. But that's not in its intelligence. So it fights and it breaks the shell until little by little it gains its freedom. Then another shell is created. Then it fights against that. Now imagine if every time human beings were to suffer a pain, they would be taken to Kaiser, they would be medicated. All of our habits are like shells. If you look at them the right way, if you can have the right perspective, if you have the right tools, what all these pains and sufferings, but most importantly, sacrifice. And we don't welcome sacrifice. It's difficult to overcome habits. You know, the only way you will sacrifice anything, if you love someone, that you say, their desire are far more valuable than what I desire for myself. And when you love someone, you put them here, you become here. Okay? In the absence of that, you're going to continue just being the way you are. Okay? But I think the verse in the Quran is quite right in the Quran, which is the best book you can ever read. There are 2 books. The book of your own life experiences, but not just read to read. Read to feel, read to think, read to process, read to understand, and then read to apply. Then the book of nature. There is this passage, J.G. Bennett was one of the late comers to Gurdjieff's cult. He has a book, and I don't remember what the title of the book is, but he says, I was sitting by the window writing, and all of a sudden this wind was blowing, and the leaves, they were just dancing for me, just for me. And what I got from the leaves dance was that continue to write, be creative, dance like the leaves. And what you have is a man who no longer needs to listen to music or have sex to be inspired. He can just look at something from the outside and interpret that experience in a way that will benefit his own creativity. Okay? So again, we have no choice but to cultivate habits and reinforce them. Okay? Should you encounter an elder of sorts, like a Don Juan or a Castaneda or a Baisahib, they're not going to tell you that anything about you is good, because you're nothing but an accumulation of many, many habits, ingrained like concrete. Teachers are like jackhammers. They want to break this shell open so this other part of you can come to rise. And we create habits for good reasons. They give you access to your future. They give you stability, maybe for all the wrong reasons, but who cares? You know. Habits are good. Yeah, Anna.
Well, I just had some.
Habits are bad, unless they're good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, what about good habits? Those broken?
You have never emailed me to come to my office.
Yeah, I know.
You have?
Yeah.
Did I reply? So?
So I didn't come to your office.
Why?
But
So what?
I didn't know when would be a good time to come.
See, this is what you don't get. اگر یار ناز کند تو نیاز کن. If I like Kendra, I'm going to send her a text. Just in case she doesn't reply, I'm going to say, oh, well, you know, maybe it didn't go through. What else can I do? So I'm going to text her again. Just in case she still doesn't reply, I'm going to stalk her and then follow her to Pete's without her noticing me. Then I will stand in line, all planned. Then suddenly say, oh, Kendra, is that you? Let me buy you a cup of coffee. You keep knocking until the door opens. But to some extent, you have to have come from a culture where it says, if there are things that you value, you want, and if you feel that there is someone out there who can give you the things you want, they're going to play hard to get. You're not going to get them easily. And for you to get what you want, you have to overcome certain tendencies. And as long as you hang on to those tendencies, that door will close. Of course, I got your email. But you need to email me again, and again, and again. My time is valuable. And just because you email me once and then you forget, that doesn't mean anything to me. What, you want a hit and run? Is that what you want? You guys don't understand anything. Tell them, Ashley.
Right.
I still don't get why someone like Cristiano Ronaldo practices every day. He knows that he can get better. And he's not overcome by his own arrogance. He's able to break that shell. Same with Magnus Carlsen. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever watched Magnus Carlsen play chess. I mean, this guy just once in a while makes uncommon moves on the board. No one has ever seen them. And he doesn't really care about losing or winning at that stage. He says, I just want to experiment with different things. You just need to keep trying. Your email went to the junk box. I'm not joking. And you said that you and Skylar want to come by, right? Or Jason, sorry, yeah. Whatever. The problem was sometimes when things go to the junk box, it means that the source is kind of questionable. That's why I didn't reply. But even if it wasn't, I still wouldn't have replied. Tell them, Ashley.
He likes to play hard, yeah. I can't just say he's right every time.
You're absolutely right. Hello, Abby. So, Ashley, what are you doing this weekend? No, not this weekend, forget. What?
Homework. Oh,
No school next week.
yes, but I still have a lot of homework. My niece is coming to stay with me this weekend.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
How old is she?
She is 12.
Why? Of all the people, you?
Well, she is, gosh, how much time do you guys have? She's really into K-pop,
Who?
Korean pop music.
Really?
It's a thing for the kids. Korea's just cranking out the.
Does she like Korean movies?
Crazy. Well, so what she's going to do this weekend is she's going to come. She's going to stay with my partner and I, and we're going to take her to the Korean art museum or the Korean art exhibit at the Open Museum. We're going to take her to barbecue. We're going to take her. She kind of loves everything Asian right now. We're going to take her on a Daiso shopping. She's having an Asian immersion experience weekend with my partner and I. My partner is also
Oh, Asian or Haitian?
Asian. She's Filipino.
Does she like Manny
Kind
Pacquiao?
of far away from Korea. As much as any Filipino does. Complicated.
Pacquiao is?
Yeah.
Pacquiao is complicated.
He's kind of a corrupt politician.
Well, who cares?
I mean, they all are. But, yeah.
Well, there are a couple of Korean movies that your niece may enjoy.
Okay.
I Saw the Devil is one of them.
Scary. Sounds scary.
They eat people.
Oh,
Yeah. So cannibalism.
okay.
But I mean, it's
She's 12.
has lots of blood and it's quite gory. But
Maybe in a few years.
no, she's ready.
Okay.
The other is Man from Nowhere.
Okay.
It's about rescuing this 12-year-old kid.
Man from nowhere. That's all.
Yeah, it has a little bit of violence, the first maybe 2 hours.
Less violence than the one that people eat.
No, it's the same, but it's a different kind of violence.
Okay.
Tell her I said hi.
Okay.
Anyone else? Remember, next week there's no school. So any of you have, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is it possible for there to be polygamy between multiple spiritual masters and a singular student?
The what?
Polygamy between multiple spiritual masters and a single student?
No. But what, where are you going? I'm just kidding. Yeah, you have homework. You too, thank you, it's good to see you. When you say polygamy, you're talking about sex?
Like love, I guess.
Love into sex? Or just love?
Love.
No sex?
Just more of a relationship, I guess.
Sure. First of all, you have to be a really advanced student to have like 50 different teachers. One of the really good student who himself was a teacher around the 12th century or 13th century or so is Ibn al-Arabi. From what little I have read of him, his philosophy is very complicated. He was a Sufi student. Supposedly he had 600 teachers. Okay, but you have to be very advanced to kind of bring all these different dishes into your consciousness and be okay with different perspectives and be able to live with them. What usually happens though is you have one student gravitating towards one teacher. They work together for a long time until a good amount of teacher's interior begin to live inside the student. That becomes a GPS for the student for the rest of his or her life. And it's usually her. Men don't make good students. Women are great students. Okay? The other thing about spiritual teachers is that they have a component that you and I don't really understand. Something about them is crystallized. It's like if I have saved money and you are my son, and near the end of my life, I'm giving you all of my cash, which is like $5 million. What you need to understand that inside this lump sum of money I'm giving you, there is a part of me that's a Scrooge. There's a part of me that understands the value of money, the sacrifices I've made, the blood, the sweat, loving you so much that I said, you know what, instead of spending that money on me, I'm going to save it for him. Okay. Now, I'll tell you, right now, for the next like 2, 3, 4, 5 years, if I live that long, I will do whatever I can to buy a property for my children. Okay? And I don't do it because I love them. I do it because I know how difficult life is. And I just want to lessen the burden that they will have. Okay? And so, anyways, any other questions? Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la. So again, yeah, one teacher, maybe 10, 15, 20 students. That's polygamy. And that particular kind of love, it's something we can talk about at a later stage. And should that love turns into like physical intimacy, that also has different kinds of components that we can talk about like in a few years. That's it? Oh yeah. Anyone else? Balak. Caitlin, right? Yeah.
You believe in the concept of ego death?
No, see, English is a bad language. Bye, you guys. No. Yeah. Bye. Have a nice weekend. There are 3 egos in Arabic. Nafs ammare, nafs lawame, và nafs mutma'ineh. There is an ego that's connected to your physical body and your physical life. There is an ego that is much more refined, let's just say. And there's an ego specifically designed to hold your spiritual life. These are three different worlds. Their function is different. The way they express themselves differently. Consider for a moment what Jesus says in the Gospel of John. You see me, you see the Father. That's like a man who has a huge ego testicles. Right? Did you guys get that? Right? Now, that's not blasphemous. You have a man who is like 90% soul and 10% flesh. He has every right to say what he said. And the nice thing is when you run into a Jesus of sorts, you don't need to go to the mosque or the church. That is right there, the living Bible, right in front of you. So when you just use the English language, there are so many things that are missing in it. English language is designed for, say, more technological, bye, it's good to see you, okay, and more scientific ways of expressing human existence. Indian tradition, Arabic language, Persian, they kind of are able to kind of express things that the English language can't. The word for human being, we have insan, we have bashar, we have adam. Insan comes from the word nosia, which means an animal that just forgets. What a teacher can do is push you to remember. Okay? But then you move into the second stage, which is bashar. The problem with bashar is you wake up, you remember, you have passion, but then you forget. The task of any good teacher is to get you from forgetfulness to remembering, but they know that how easily you can fall back into forgetting. So they keep manipulating, exploiting you until you become Adam. And Adam in the Arabic Persian tradition is a guy or any human being who comes to realize that they had fallen. They need to make lots of sacrifices because once you fall, it's like you cheat on your wife or you don't go to school and you get to be 50. And then at a certain point you say, man, now I realize how important it was for me to stay in school. Now you realize something, okay? And that's the position of Adam. He comes to realize he had the best of everything in paradise, okay? But because of certain aspects of his own psyche, he fell or she fell. And now what happens, he desperately understands what this place down here looks like. He doesn't like it. It's kind of like what she said. I don't like capitalism. I want to escape from it, but how? Okay? But you can't escape capitalism by reinforcing the old habits. Okay? You have to become so desperate. And whenever you become desperate for anything, you have emotions you don't understand. You have thoughts you don't really understand. You have feelings you don't understand. And that'll break your back and bend your knees. Now you become in a state of prayer where you just long and lament and yearn to be removed from a place down here so you can ascend. And nobody can do this on their own. It's impossible. You can't do books. No audios, no YouTubes. Malak. Yes.
These egos are valued differently, right? They have different levels of importance.
They have different levels of importance. If you happen to be very, 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 very sufficient, what you can do is you're mostly, let's just say, women do this really well. At a certain point, they say to themselves, I'm just not going to give my body to anyone until I find a worthy customer. A customer who appreciates my body, my emotions, my mind, as well as my history. Okay? And so what they do is they go out on dates. And they want to kind of figure out the level of the person's maturity. Now, they may be attracted to his body, and they may even desire sex, a lot of sex. But they're at a place where they say, I'm just not going to give my body so cheaply and easily. They wait and wait and wait until there's a good amount of understanding who this man is. And then what they do, they come down, should the man be found worthy, they will have sex with the man. But what will happen, this particular intimacy, the woman brings forth not only her body, but also emotions and intellect and history, and puts it within the container of what's called a man. knowing that this man is worthy to hold all 3 or 4 components. Okay? So now in the absence of that, what you usually have is you have sex, but the emotions are absent, the intellect is absent, surely the history is like invisible somewhere. Okay? And there are moments where you have the body as well as the emotions, but you keep your thoughts to yourself. And in thoughts, you have doubts, you have fears, you have all sorts of concerns. You have to become very comfortable to open yourself up in so many different ways. Okay? But this other place where a woman begins to understand who she is, what her value is, and then gifts herself to a man, once she does, she puts all of herself into it. I mean, and that is what makes intimacy valuable and meaningful. So is it possible that someone at this stage, someone like Jesus, can come down and have sex with Mary Magdalene? Yes. But is he having sex the way I have sex? No. And maybe we can devote a week or 2 of this class to the mysteries of sex, spirituality, and various cultures that have spoken about these 2 components in such a profound way that temples have been built for this. The Taj Mahal, I don't know if any of you guys in this class have ever been to India. It was built by Shah Shuja, and he wanted to have sex with this woman in a temple, not in a room somewhere, not in a motel, in a temple, because it was a gift he and she could be given to the gods. That's how sacred it was. Ana, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la, yes.
Yes, how does choice impact the relationship?
If you're talking about a relationship, where are you going?
They'll take my part of the job.
It's good to see you, Ana.
See if I'll stop you after whenever.
Yeah, look forward to it. What was the question?
How does choice impact?
If you're working with a teacher, don't exercise choice. I'll tell you from my own experience, and it may be flawed, I don't know, but it worked for me. That whenever I had a thought, Hussein would say, who gave you permission to think? Whenever I expressed my feelings, who gave you permission to feel? I understand now. I mean, if you have kids, some of us in this class, Abi and I have kids, and we'll tell you, kids have a big mouth, and kids think without knowing anything, and kids express their feelings without really knowing what the hell they're doing. They're stupid. I mean, they're nice little animals, but they're stupid, okay? And, thank you. And so, it's what we talked about last week. If you want to talk about old age, for example, don't do it near me. Because you're a 20-year-old punk. You don't know what you're talking about, okay? If there are things that are above you, have the humility to keep your mouth shut. If on the other hand, you want to talk about what it means to be 20, then talk to your 20-year-old friends, or talk to your 15-year-old nephew to understand what it means to be 20. Okay? You can always see what's below you, but never above you. And that's a difficulty. Because you don't see what's above you, you approach it very cautiously, with a great amount of, many number of doubts, fears, uncertainties. Why? You want to figure out what you're doing and why you're doing it. You want power, you want control. Whenever you work with a teacher, you have zero power over anything. Sometimes after, I have worked with a student for a number of years, I look at them. I say, listen, you just need to have children. Don't come here anymore. Find yourself a man, have babies. Okay, it's done. Now you can play with these ideas in a factual way. Become a mother, become a father, figure out what the hell you want to do now. Idea just living in your head means nothing. Now the conflict begins. Now comes the real test. Which is very difficult. Yeah. Yeah.
That choice impacts romantic relationships. The average person.
I mean, if you like Caitlin, go out with her. Fine. You know, as long as both of you are in school, as long as look, first of all, no one really knows how anyone is going to be once they have power in life. Right now, both of you are poor. I don't know how she's going to be when she gets her PhD. Maybe she'll be a brute. Maybe you'll be a brute once you get a PhD. So no one knows. So right now, both of you are poor, and you have the same language in poverty. Once you become rich and privileged, no one knows how that's going to impact the relationship. The best you can do is, like anything else in life, it really is a shot in the dark. Despite all the nonsensical things I've said thus far, the truth is, sometimes relationships just work and they work beautifully. Sometimes you just don't work. And sometimes you spend like 50 years just making sure things don't fall apart. What I will tell you is that any relationship, regardless, whether it's spiritual or just romantic, regular kind, that they are a profoundly complicated engine, complex machinery. And you need to figure out at some point how these things work. There are certain lines you can't cross. There are certain lines you can cross just a little bit. And there are certain lines you should cross. You know. And these are things you just learn over time. You know, you just need to kind of have just a basic foundation, that's all. You know, if you have a 6-inch slab, you can build a 2-story house on it. If you only have a 2-inch slab, the best you can do is just put a tiny little shed on it. Okay? So if you want to build a life, make sure you have a thick slab and some rebars. And make sure the frame is on the concrete, not on sand. It's not going to last. Skyler.
When you're talking about the version of truth, like how love is kind of not permanent, like it will end. How do you think that applies to like family?
You mean like parents?
Yeah, parents, siblings. Like,
look, by the time you really understand and figure out what it really means for something to come to life and for something to die, you will have gone through so many ups and downs. The end result is one of detachment. It doesn't mean you don't love. It means you have an open door policy, okay? But just in case no one walks in, you'll be fine. I love my brother, and we used to talk every day. But as his life becomes more complicated, and as he ages, as I age, I talk to him maybe once or twice a week, sometimes every 2 weeks. And yesterday, as I was walking, I said, you know, I haven't talked to Iraj for like a number of days now. What if he dies? It'd be okay. But I am 60. You know, you have to go through lots of different kind of love affairs with things. And you have to create all these fantasies. And eventually all these fantasies will crumble. And then if you have the right ability, the right way of thinking about things, there comes a point where you say, you know what? It seems like this is the common theme, that things are given to me, I enjoy them, then I cease to enjoy them, then I put them like in the front of the payment for people to take. I mean, I don't know how many companions you've had, but at a certain point you break up with them. And every time you break up with someone, in essence what you're doing is you're putting them in the middle of the street saying, I'm done with this. Anybody else who wants to take them, fine, take them. But I no longer want it. It's no different than tables and chairs. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean you don't love him. It just means you understand how relationships work.
that and this more only applies to like the context of like longer and relationships like family and like marriages, or just like really long term friends, but kind of when that like initial like infatuation dies, do you think it leaves something that's different from who's over there? Like something that's not necessarily love, but still like, I mean, like,
Look, forgive me, I never saw my parents holding hands, and I never saw my parents kiss. In fact, I never saw anyone in my immediate surrounding ever do those things. So this idea of romanticism in culture, amongst people, It never existed. Okay? So none of us were born with the idea that should you have a girlfriend, you need to hold their hand and kiss them and shower them with this and that. It didn't exist. The other thing is, when you live in poverty, you can't romanticize life. Look, if you're broken, when you go to a therapist, you don't romanticize being bullied and being harassed and being abused. It's all pain and suffering that you're trying to understand. You know? Relationships, regardless, they're just hard work. There is no fun in anything that's tough. And when you're able to kind of withstand the difficulties of relationship, you just grow tough skin. You know, Fiddler on the Roof. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie where the father goes, the daughter goes to the father and says, I've met someone, I'm in love. Love? What the hell is love? Love is not my language. What do you mean by love? I just love him. I would do anything for him. And so he goes home and looks at his wife and says, Joanna, do you love me? What is that? Do you love me? She says, well, I wash your underwear every day. I cook for you, clean for you. If that's not love, I don't know what is. But what his daughter was trying to suggest is that love has this element of romanticizing life, turning into a movie, so to speak. Whereas the love I define for you has to do with just making sure the house is clean when you come in, that I give your back a massage, rub your shoulders, take care of the kids, Infatuation will eventually die. Love will have a different shade and color to it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was.
And that's the only thing, The only dangerousness of, I think, romanticizing life in our age, 21st century, is we are so hungry to come to life that we are willing to kind of just get rid of things, bring new things into our life, just being an emotional junkie. And it's not really our fault. I mean, there are so many villains involved in creating the culture that we currently have. You shouldn't ever feel lonely at the age of 18 or 19. You should have tons of friends. But this is not the culture that allows you for those things. You should not suffer depression at the age of 20 or 15 or 10, but that's not this culture. So there are lots of things in this culture that you experience at such a young age, and then you try to kind of figure things out for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Right? Again, going back to my own stuff with Hussein is the following. Look, I was 18. I didn't have very many issues. I didn't have very many addictions except to like sports. Right? What teachers do is they're like cliff notes. Instead of reading 5,000 of the Bible pages, you only read 15 pages. That's all you do. Teachers are like this time capsule. You get in them and they push you forward. You may be 18, but in a couple of years you begin to think and feel and behave like a 30-year-old man. Now, it is true that you can't go back to being 18 and hang out with your 18-year-old friends. But now your friends are 30, 40, 50, 60, much more mature. They're married, they have kids, and now you begin to learn different parts of life from them. You can't learn anything valuable from 18-year-olds, except fun. And the sort of fun that basically just destroys your life in many ways, okay? So teachers are like, there's like, in a couple of weeks, we're going to have intersession classes. In 3 weeks, you'll get 3 units. Teachers are like that. They're like intersession courses or summer classes. Instead of sitting in a classroom for 16 weeks, you sit in them for 3 weeks, or maybe just 6 weeks. Does it mean that you will suffer more, sacrifice more? Absolutely. Is it worth it? If you are able to think about this stuff the right way, it's worth it, so worth it. You don't need to get married, go through a divorce, 5 kids, and later come to realize, well, maybe now I should start to read books. Read books right now, so you don't have regrets 10 years from now. Sophia Loren, I don't know if any of you discuss, beautiful, gorgeous human being. Okay, not anymore. But Sophia Loren had a couple of options in marriage. She said there's a guy who's really, really good looking, an actor, famous, rich. And there's a guy who's older, bald, he's rich, but not very attractive. So she sits back and she contemplates, do I want to marry fame, good looks, or do I want to marry someone who's stable? She married the older, uglier guy. She still married him. And they have beautiful children. But for you to forgo Brad Pitt and get married to Bill Murray, which is really not a really good choice, but if you were to do that, it suggests to me at least that even though Bill Murray on the outside is a profoundly unattractive human being, there is something about him that is very attractive to you. The way he conducts himself, behaves himself. It just matures your life. And you like that. Do not be troubled. Everything's okay. So, do you have any questions or comments before we go? Well, I know many of you have to. Thank you, Jason. Take care. So thank you. Sorry for keeping you so long. Have a nice break. Tell your parents I said hello. Stay safe. Have a nice time with your break. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.